The Starlight Echoes Chapter 10 The Crystal Silence. The morning began with a silence so absolute it felt heavy. When Shadow opened his eyes, the light reflecting off his ceiling wasn't the usual golden hue of a Green Hills sunrise. It was a bright, sterile white that made his glow-in-the-dark stars look faint and distant. He stepped toward the attic window, his breath hitching as he saw the world below. The green pines, the brown earth, and even the muddy patches from their game of tag had disappeared. Everything was draped in a thick, shimmering blanket of white.
It has frozen,
Shadow whispered. He moved downstairs, his footsteps silent. In the living room, Sonic was already pressed against the sliding glass door, his nose literally squashed against the pane.
"Shadow, look!"
Sonic shouted, not even turning around.
"It's a total whiteout. No school, no chores, just pure, unadulterated powder."
Shadow stepped out onto the back porch, the cold air hitting his fur like a physical shock. He reached out a gloved hand, and a single tiny flake drifted down, landing on his palm. He held his breath, leaning in to inspect it. His crimson eyes widened.
"Sonic, look at the geometry."
Under the magnifying gaze of the ultimate life form, the snowflake wasn't just a white dot. It was a perfect six-sided fractal, shimmering with a crystalline blue tint.
"It is exactly like the heart of Atlantis.
Shadow murmured, his voice filled with awe.
The ancient power sources, the way the light fractures within the lattice. It is as if the sky is shedding fragments of a lost civilization."
"Whoa,"
Sonic said, stepping out beside him, and immediately shivering.
"I usually just think of them as cold stuff that's fun to throw, but when you put it that way, it does look kinda high-tech."
Shadow walked down the porch steps, his boots crunching into the fresh snow. He knelt, scooping up a handful of the powder. To anyone else, it was just winter. To Shadow, it was a world transformed into the imagery of the movies he had come to love. The silence of the snow-covered forest reminded him of the deep-sea ruins, peaceful, preserved, and beautiful.
The music lady sang of lithium and numbing peace.
Shadow said, watching the flakes swirl around his dark quills.
I believe the earth has created its own version of that song. It is a quiet that does not feel empty.
Sonic grinned, his mischievous spirit returning.
"Well, if it's a song, then it needs a beat, and the beat sounds a lot like a snowball hitting Knuckles in the back of the head. You in Atlantis?"
Shadow looked at the crystal in his hand, then back at his brother. The ghost in the sky was still up there somewhere, but under this thick white blanket, the world felt like it belonged only to them.
I believe,
Shadow said, his eyes glowing with a rare, playful light,
that I can provide the necessary impact for this symphony.
Shadow has found the beauty in the cold. The Battle of the Snow Forts didn't just start, it was declared. Knuckles had spent the last hour using his massive fists like industrial earth movers, piling up a literal mountain of snow near the garage. He hadn't just built a wall. He had built a fortress, complete with a throne of ice, and a perimeter of jagged snow spikes.
"The clan of the Red Mist shall not fall,"
Knuckles bellowed, standing atop his battlements with a stack of perfectly spherical snow projectiles.
"Approach, and face the sting of the winter waste."
Opposite him, near the oak trees, Sonic and Shadow had formed an unlikely alliance. Their fort was sleeker, built for speed and quick retreats. Sonic was the ammo runner, blurring across the yard to gather fresh powder, while Shadow used his clinical precision to carve the snow into aerodynamic slugs.
"Okay, the plan is simple.
Sonic whispered, ducking behind a wall of packed ice.
I draw his fire by doing a victory lap around the mailbox. While he's distracted by my awesome speed, you warp behind the throne and initiate the pincer move."
Shadow weighed a snowball in his hand. He looked at the way the light fractured through the ice, those Atlantis crystals again.
His defenses are structurally sound, but his lateral coverage is lacking. I shall execute the chaos slide through the drift.
"Go!"
Sonic yelled. The yard turned into a chaotic blur of white. Knuckles launched a barrage that looked less like snowballs and more like falling boulders. Sonic was a streak of blue, laughing as he zigzagged through the minefield of Knuckles' throws.
"You cannot outrun the winter, Hedgehog."
Knuckles roared, reaching for more ammo. But Shadow was already gone. He didn't teleport. He moved with a low, skating glide across the frozen surface, his red stripes cutting through the white haze like a laser. He stayed low, using the natural dips in the yard as cover, his headphones playing a high-tempo Evanescence track that turned the battle into a cinematic montage. Just as Knuckles prepared a massive mega ball, Shadow rose from the snow directly behind the red fortress.
The sequence is broken, Knuckles.
Shadow said calmly. A perfectly aimed, compact snowball tapped Knuckles square on the back of his head. The echidna froze. The mega ball in his hands crumbled into powder.
I have been struck from the rear.
Knuckles gasped, falling to one knee with dramatic flair.
Additionable, yet effective, strike.
Sonic skidded to a halt next to them, spraying a cloud of snow into the air.
Victory for the blue and black team! The fortress has fallen!
Shadow stood atop the ice throne, looking out over the yard. His fur was dusted with white, and his breath hitched in the cold air, but he was smiling, a real unshadowed smile. For a moment, the surveillance drones and the project didn't exist. There was only the cold, the crystals, and the brothers who made the winter feel warm. Maddie watched from the kitchen window holding 2 mugs of hot cocoa.
I think the ultimate life form just won his first war.
She whispered to Tom.
Yeah.
Tom replied, leaning against the counter.
And I think he's finally realized that winning feels a lot better when you've got a team.
The Battle of the Snow Forts is won. The war had ended in a stalemate of freezing fingers and damp fur, but the peace treaty was signed the moment Maddie opened the back door, the scent of hot cocoa acting as a white flag. Now the living room was transformed into a recovery ward for exhausted heroes. A fire crackled in the hearth, sending a warm, orange glow dancing across the walls. Sonic was sprawled out on the rug, his quills a mess of damp tangles as he held a mug with both hands. Knuckles sat cross-legged, staring intensely at the flames as if he were trying to negotiate with the fire spirits for more heat. Shadow sat in the large armchair nearest the fire, wrapped in his silver-threaded blanket. He held a mug of cocoa, extra marshmallows, per Sonic's tactical recommendation, and watched the way the steam rose in delicate, ghostly plumes.
The transition from the Atlantis cold to this thermal energy.
Shadow murmured, his voice sleepy and relaxed.
It is a biological shock, but a welcome one.
That's just the thaw, Shads.
Sonic yawned, resting his head on a pillow.
The best part of a snow day isn't the snow. It's the part where you don't have to do anything but melt into the furniture.
Shadow looked at his brothers. Tails was on the floor nearby, tinkering with a small heating element he'd built to dry out their gloves faster. The house felt smaller in the winter, tucked away from the rest of the world, and for a moment, the project felt like a dream from someone else's life. Maddie walked over and draped a fresh, warm towel over Shadow's shoulders.
You did good out there today, Shadow. I haven't seen you move like that since, well, ever.
Shadow looked up at her, the firelight reflecting in his deep crimson eyes.
The geometry of the day was inspiring. I did not realize that a battle could result in so much laughter. Usually, a battle only results in silence.
Well, in this house, battles usually end in cookies.
Tom said, walking in with a tray of fresh out of the oven chocolate chips. Shadow took a cookie, the warmth of the chocolate seeping through his gloves. He looked at the fire, then at the marks on the doorframe, and then at the family surrounding him. He realized that the Even in Death song had a counterpart, a melody that didn't speak of ghosts, but of the living. He leaned back, the lithium piece finally settling over him for real. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't a shadow. He was just a boy by a fire with a heart that was finally truly warm. After the cocoa was finished and the warmth had fully returned to their bones, the living room shifted from a recovery ward into a high-tech editing suite.
Okay, I've got the footage.
Tails announced, his eyes bright as he synced his tornado drone to the big screen.
The 4K slow-mo of Knuckles getting hit by that snowball is literally cinematic gold.
Shadow sat up, his interest piqued. He looked at the library of music on his MP3 player, his finger hovering over a track that felt different from his usual melancholic ballads. It was Going Under, a song with a driving, heavy beat and an edge that matched the intensity of their war in the yard.
This one,
Shadow said, his voice firm.
The rhythm matches the velocity of our movement. It creates a sequence of controlled chaos.
They spent the next hour huddled together. Shadow took the lead on the editing, using the skills he'd learned to time the heavy guitar riffs to the exact moment Sonic blurred across the screen. He synced the crashing drums to the mega balls, exploding against the fortress walls. He even added a glitch effect during his own chaos slide, making him look like a dark ghost haunting the snow. The final product was an action AMV that turned a backyard game into a high-stakes epic. As the final powerful chord of the song rang out, the screen showed the four of them standing in the snow laughing and messy, with the text Team Wachowski fading into view.
That was epic!
Sonic cheered, throwing his hands up. The sound was heavy, deliberate, and echoed through the quiet house with an authority that didn't belong to a neighbor or a friend. It wasn't the light, rhythmic tap of a local. It was the rhythmic, metallic rap of someone who wasn't there to visit, but to claim. The laughter in the room died instantly. Sonic's ears twitched toward the door. Knuckles stood up, his fists subconsciously clenching. Shadow's eyes darted to the window, his red stripes glowing faintly in the dim light of the fireplace. The ghost in the sky had finally come down to earth. Tom looked at Maddie, his hand instinctively moving toward where his badge usually sat on the counter. He walked slowly toward the front door, the floorboards creaking under his weight.
Who would be out in this weather?
Maddie whispered, her voice tight. Tom reached for the handle, his gaze meeting Shadow's for a split second, a silent promise to stand his ground. He turned the deadbolt. The cold air of the winter night rushed in as the door swung open, revealing a silhouette standing against the white, moonlit snow.